What's up, nerds? Welcome back. So it was 30 years ago now that we got our second symbiote in Marvel Comics. The much more psychopathic, murderous, serial killerish type of symbiote, and who I have been personally just enamored with ever since I was a child, which might say something about me, but we're not going to dwell on that just now because today we have to talk about Carnage Forever. So yes, it was 30 years ago now that Carnage was first introduced, and I remember having a fascination with him when I was about 6, maybe 7 years old, when my cousin was telling me about him. But at the time, I think my cousin was a little bit confused because he was calling him cartilage, and he was telling me he was made out of the same type of stuff that's in your ear. So, close. Yes, there is cartilage in your ear, and cartilage does sound like carnage. So I think he was just confused at the time. Granted, he was only like, I think I was about 6 or 7, so he was like 9 or 10. He's a couple years older than me. So, I mean, I can't blame him too much. We were both just children. But I just remember being so enamored by him telling me about, who this character was and what type of monster he was. And I just, ever since then, I've always loved him. Him and Venom. But I mean, it is what it is. A lot of people love both of those characters, so I'm not alone in that. Obviously, that's why they're putting out this book. That's why they made a movie with the character in it. That's why the character is still so damn popular. But we're going to get into it here because some of this shit, not gonna lie, some of this was kind of, well, one page in particular was hard for me to get through this. And if you've already read this book, you know exactly which part it was hard for Dylan to get through. But we'll go ahead and just kind of jump right in. So we're starting here. There are a couple stories in here, but this first one deals with this little girl who's sitting outside of St. Estes, orphanarium or whatever the hell. And so she's sitting there. She's drawing on the sidewalk with chalk, as children do, when this man comes walking up asking her, what are you doing? And she's saying that she's drawing, or I'm sorry, drawing. And then she says, Frank and Dee don't like me in the house during the day. So she points at like the pictures that she's drawing. She says, that's me and that's Banff. And she's telling him about all that. He says, yeah, but what are you doing here? I thought all the street folks knew to stay away from St. Estes. Come on, kid, let me walk you to Covenant House. It's real close. But she says, my name is Elsie, and I ain't homeless. I mean, not all the time. So he says, oh, not all the time, huh? She says, nah. Frank found us a place that was empty, but it smells funny during the day, and I like drawlin'. What's so bad about here anyway? I like it. Used to be a school, he says, till some psycho burned it down. Like 100 people died. Kids, teachers, nuns, everybody. Nobody will even buy the lot now. Come on, let me walk you down to Covenant House. But she says, I told you I ain't homeless. I live with Frank and Dee. He tells her, I can see those burns on your arms. I'm not telling you gotta go home. Go anywhere you want. But the kid who burned down St. Estes, there's crazy, crazy stories about him and about this place. Ever since the fire, a lot of people still go missing around here. The place is cursed or something. She says, it's okay. I'm okay. I'm just drawing. So he's like, all right, fine, whatever. I'm going to go ahead and leave you here. He says, but I am telling you, kid, don't stay past dark. St. Estes is not a place you want to go. So he tells her, unless you want to disappear. So we see where it's nighttime. She's still sitting there drawing on the sidewalk or whatever, when all of a sudden these three Utes walk up, and they're all pretty much drunk, but the girl is less drunk than both of the guys, as we can see, because one of the guys is just like burping and shit. The other one says, dude, you're totally gonna puke. I can hear it. And she says, like, ew, you better not. So she walks up because she knows this is a little girl, and she says, that's really good. But then one of the dudes is like, what is? So he walks over, and they all start looking at it. She tells them that, the homeless kid's drawing a picture. And he's like, oh, I want to draw, I want to draw something. He takes the chalk from her. She tries to tell him, like, well, that's mine or whatever. And then the other dude goes and just, like, kicks her box of chalk. And then the girl is saying, what the hell, Mike? So he's like just drunkenly yelling out goal. She says, well, damn, at least give the kid some change or something. But the other dude is saying, I don't have any cash on me. So she says, I'm so sorry. We don't have any change. And then she just says, have a good night anyway. And then they all leave. That's when the little girl is remembering that the guy said St. Estes is not a place you want to go unless you want to disappear. So she's sitting there, it's starting to rain, and then she just decides, you know what, I do want to disappear. So she goes in the building, and as she's walking down, she slips down this like fallen down hallway or whatever it is. So she falls all the way down to these rooms, and she's kind of looking around. She hears just creaking from inside, which old buildings do regardless. She's walking through, just kind of exploring, when she hears a voice come from the darkness saying, "Oh, is baby lost? Baby need a new friend? I need a new friend. I lost my last one." So she's saying, "D told me monsters ain't real." And he says, "Yeah, well, something tells me you know better, right? Don't you, baby?" And that's when, he just kind of attacks. They do this full close up on his face, which I think was not really used to the best of effect. They could have done something much different here. I know what they were trying to do, in that they were trying to do this whole thing of like, oh, wouldn't that be scary if it was you? And all of a sudden you just see, Carnage's face coming around at you. Well, yeah, but when you do it like this, where it's literally just a drawing of his face and literally nothing else, I don't really have much to be scared of. It's just a drawing of Carnage. Like, this would make for a nice poster, maybe, but it doesn't really do much for the story. Anyway, so we see where we go over to Frank and Dee, who are in this abandoned house, and we can see Dee is asleep. Frank is sitting there, listening to music or playing a game on his phone, while Bamf, the dog, is laying right next to him. So that's when Elsie comes in, she slams the door, starts going upstairs, which kind of sort of wakes up, the mom, and she just kind of has like, "What's that?" And he says, "Just the kid." She's like, "Thought I heard a man talking, but he doesn't say anything." So we go over into the next day, and we can hear just like, well, not we can hear, we can see where there's this like mumbling coming from upstairs, which wakes her up. She goes and starts looking around because she can hear the sound. She walks into the room and asks, "Who's in here with you?" But she says, "I'm just playing with Cletus." And we can see where she has these like crudely made dolls that she's playing with. So she kind of like looks around the room, sees there's no one there, and then tells her, "Find somewhere else to play today. Frank and I are doing stuff." And then she goes back downstairs, tells Frank, "Kid's getting weird. She's doing the imaginary friend thing now." And he's asking her, "Did you see Bamf when you went up there? Can't find that damn dog anywhere." And she says, "Well, she'll turn up. Where's she gonna go?" And this is where we go over into the next day, because as you saw earlier, this was Tuesday. Now we're going into Wednesday, where we can see that same guy from before is kind of walking. He sees, the burned down building, but he doesn't see the kid there. So he still sees her drawing, and then all of a sudden a cop comes walking up saying, "Hey, Jerry." He says, "Oh, hey, Mitch, you seen a little girl hanging around today?" But he tells her, "No, why?" He tells him, "She was out here by herself a couple days ago. Sounded like her folks were squatting someplace. Kind of worried about her, I guess." But the cop says, "I'll ask around, but you're probably right to be nervous." So he tells him, "What's that mean?" And then he says, "3 grad students went missing around here a couple nights ago. We found signs of violence one street over, so I'd imagine it were the 3 drunken idiots who were just stumbling around." Which kind of tells you something, because considering that, the little girl was sitting on the sidewalk, and all of a sudden she went into the building, and then she got encountered by Carnage, and then went looking for them, they must not have gotten very far. But anyway, so Jerry is asking, what kind of violence? And he tells him the kind people don't usually walk away from. "Why? You know something?" But he's like, "No." And then he says, "Just let me know if you see that kid, yeah? Friendly little girl, maybe 10 or 11. Said her name was Elsie." Now, if we look at the drawing, we can see where, yes, she drew like the outside of the house, she drew herself, she drew Bamf, and then there's something in the background. We go over to Thursday, and then we can see where, Frank and whatever the chick's name was, I already forgot. Anyway, she's asking him, "What's taking so long?" He says, "I'm trying." And we can see where it's a cold night. He's trying to block all the windows so the cold air doesn't get inside, because obviously they're not paying for this place, so the heat isn't on, so they can only do so much to try and stay warm. So she says, "Well, try faster. It's still cold as hell down here." So he covers up one window, asks how it is, and she says there's still a draft. So he says, "Hold on, I think it's blowing through the closet." And then here we go. Here is the part where Dylan was not comfortable. Here comes the part where I did not like. I get it. We're talking about Carnage here, so very much of this was supposed to be expected, but at the same time, I still don't like it. And I've mentioned this multiple times in other videos, how much I don't like this certain type of thing. So let's just kind of look at it. So he finds Bamf in the closet, completely skinned. Where all of the innards are, we will never know. Because yes, Banff has, and this is what I want to know. I get it, the parents, well, I'm assuming they're parents, whatever they are to the little girl, to Elsie, whatever they are to her, they are not good ones. As we saw earlier, they were burning her with cigarettes and shit like that. So obviously they are not fit to be parents to her. But what did the dog do to you? You know what? I get it. It's Carnage who did it, but still, why was the dog first? Just no. That shouldn't have even been done. So I get it. Again, it's kind of meant to sell to us that Carnage is this sociopathic killer that will kill anything and everything that's living just because it enjoys doing that, because it has absorbed the personality of Cletus Cassidy. I get it. I understand all of that. I recognize it. I know it. But it still doesn't make this any better to read. So, of course, he gets freaked out and he starts backing up. He starts kind of retching, and that's where, of course, she comes into the room and she says, "Oopsie, did I do something bad?" So he's kind of threatening, like he's going to beat the hell out of her or whatever, and then he comes up. But of course, since she is now imbued with the powers of Carnage, she kind of knocks him back and says, "Cletus says you ain't going to beat nobody ever again." And we can see where she's looking sort of like the Exorcist. And of course, that is the end of Frank. So then she's coming up saying, "Frank, what the hell is all the noise up here? Did you find that?" And we can see all these like sound effects coming from inside the room, which kind of tells you what's about to happen. So she walks in and sees where Carnage is literally just, snacking on him. And she says, or Carnage says, "Hi, Mama. Cletus says you lied to us. Remember all those little burns you and Frank gave us, Mama?" And of course, she, has to trip in classic horror movie fashion. But anyway, Carnage comes up and says they don't hurt anymore. The fire feels nice even. One thing I will make note of here, Carnage and, all symbiotes really are supposed to be afraid of fire. Like, that should be a thing. And yet instead here Carnage is saying, "Oh no, it's actually really nice. I enjoy the fire." There's too much back and forth. I don't know which way to go with it anymore. It is what it is. So Carnage says, "Let us show you," and that's where we see the screaming from from the mom. So now we go over to Friday. Mind you, this is all taking place within what, half a week? About something around there. We see where Jerry is there. He sees her stand or like sitting on the sidewalk, and he goes up to her and says, "Elsie, hey, you're back. When I didn't see you for a while, I was worried." And she says, "You said I should go home, silly." But he's like, "Yeah, I know, but people out here go missing sometimes, She says, "Yeah, Jerry, I know that." And he says, "A few people went missing right after I saw you, and then there was this fire the other, you know, I don't remember telling you my name before." She says, "Well, how else would I know it if you didn't tell me?" Without even looking up at him. He says, did something happen to your arm?" Because as you can see, her arm doesn't have any marks on it at all, which would obviously be alarming. And he says, "There were burns on your arm before. I saw them. What happened to you?" And she says, "What about your burns, Jerry? The ones you got at St. S's?" And we can see where she's looking very much evil. And then she kind of goes on to describe all of this, saying, "When the fire in Sister Agatha's office finally ate through the floor, and it fell in on your and Tommy's room." So he's like starting to tell her, just stay back. But she says, "Cletus says you tried to pull the burn-in joist off of Tommy's legs for about 2 seconds before you gave up and ran away like a scared little puppy. He says Tommy screamed and cried like hell the whole time you was running away. He says you still hear Tommy's screams every night, and that's why you can't ever leave this place. You don't need to worry about Tommy, he's not alone. There's lots of people here, Jerry. Lots and lots. They're all waiting for you. We'll all be waiting when you finally come home." Now, we can see where she's done another chalk drawing with herself and Carnage in pink, and then all of the captured souls behind them in white. And of course, everybody looks sad. And of course, you know me being who I am, the one that makes me the saddest is seeing the dog with a sad face. Because, I mean, yeah, you got children, you got nuns, and everybody else in there. You got, Frank and the mom in there. That's pretty sad. But, the dog, what did the dog do to you for it to deserve to be here? Anyway, that's where that story leaves off. And it doesn't really give much of a satisfaction, because as we're about to see, I don't know, is this little girl Carnage now going forward, like, until it's changed again? We'll see. Anyway, we come to this prison. We can see where the guard is coming in or whatever. And then there's this prisoner sitting behind, a locked door. And then it says, hey, Velez, what the fuck are you doing? We can see where he's messing with like an alarm up there. And he says, I'm sorry, but he said he'd spare me. He said he'd let me go if I helped, because he's lighting a lighter to, this is basically just a smoke alarm, but it's meant to set off the sprinklers, as we can see. All of a sudden, the water starts coming out. The guards are standing around saying like, "Ah, geez, what the hell's going on?" And then all of a sudden, we see where red starts shooting out of the sprinkler system, which tells you exactly what's about to happen. So they're being kind of coated in this redness, and they don't really know what's going on. One of the guards says, "What is this shit?" As we start to see tiny little blades forming from the red droplets on his skin. So of course, they start cutting the shit out of him and everyone else, killing all of them. And then we can see where, one last droplet or rivulet, I guess, really comes from the sprinkler, falls on the ground, and that starts to form Carnage, who says, "Run along now, Santiago Velez, before I have a mind for a little more carnage." So that's where that last guard just says fucking runs away. So Carnage is coming up to the cell, and then we can see from inside, the person sitting inside says, "I knew someone would eventually come for me. I had my ideas, but if I had to guess, I wouldn't have picked you in a million years." Well, would you like to know my answer? So Carnage is asking, your answer? He says, it's obvious. Cletus Cassidy would have no reason to be here. You're looking for a host. My answer is yes. All you've got to do is get the access cards from the guard captains then, which is exactly what Carnage does. It says takes 2 to unlock the containment field, which again, Carnage does. And says, and that'll leave us with about 2 minutes before the backup arrives and those gates open. So, how do you want to do this? I mean, I'm not quite sure how this works, considering my condition, and we can see where it's Spider-Man's villain, Hydro Man, to which Carnage is like, you see, Morris, you're a smart man. It makes you confident, fearless. Do you think that is a good thing, to have no fear? It's a pity. You had almost everything right, and so that's where he starts to kind of freak out, where we can see these tendrils from Carnage are starting to pierce his body. And so he's starting to struggle, while Carnage says, I know, it should be easy for you to escape. You're water after all. Universal conduit and all that. But that's exactly what I'm reaching into, Morris. Do you even understand the true extent of your power, as he starts to yell out in pain? But then Carnage says, why would I take you for a host when it is only your powers I desire? Why would I bond with you when all I need to do is pull you apart? So we can see where, the backup is starting to come. As Carnage continues to speak, saying, you see, Hydro Man, I was with Cletus for so very long. I've only recently begun to understand the full extent of my own capabilities without my host, and I am curious to see just how far they can go. So they finally breach the door and see Carnage kind of there, holding up Hydro Man as he's continuing to do whatever he's doing to him, and says, so before the end, would you like to glimpse one more time the very meaning of Carnage? So it says it's supposed to be, continued in Carnage #1. So we'll see what ends up happening with that. And then they just kind of have these little, like, funnies thing with kind of, like, I guess, parodies of some other stuff. Well, we can see where the first one's saying, who left all those corpses on the porch? It says someone else. And we can see where there's a little ghost that says someone else. The next one is, who killed everyone next door? No idea. There's the ghost saying no idea. Why are there body parts in the basement? Who knows? Well, there's a little ghost that says, who knows? And Carnage finally starts to put it all together and comes and confronts the ghost saying, you 3 are taking all my fun. So now it's playtime. And then we can see where they all kind of change what it says on their chest to, good lord, oh crap, run. We go from that one over to Cletus, the legitimate menace, which is obviously a play on Dennis the Menace. So he's coming in and saying, trust me, woman, do not venture into the yard. And then the last one is one of these little, like, word jumble type of things where you're supposed to, like, complete the word and then take letters from where it's circled to spell out the ultimate answer to the comic. And of course, the answer to this one is just like, because apparently that was also the answer to last week's one, but whatever. That's where this leaves off, and I don't know. We're going to see what comes from, some of these ideas they set up for Carnage coming along. Nothing in here was all terribly exciting or, groundbreaking, obviously. It was just meant to tell some stories. Again, you wanted to set up an oncoming Carnage series, fine. Go ahead and do that. I still don't understand why we had to kill the dog. I have such a thing against animal cruelty that I look at it's not that I get offended, and it's not that I'm running straight to PETA saying, "Have you seen this comic book? Shouldn't you do something?" No, I don't give a shit about that. But my whole thing is like I see the dog being skinned and I'm like, you didn't even establish that the dog did anything bad. So literally the dog was the first one to die just cuz. That doesn't make any sense to me at all. It just seems needlessly cruel by my approximation. Maybe other people out there have some other approximation, and that's totally fine. I'm just here to express what my opinion is. So, I don't know. We'll see what ends up happening. I haven't really actually seen the announcement for Carnage #1, but I assume it's probably forthcoming. So we'll see what happens with that particular series because, yeah, I'm a guy who loves my symbiotes. So we'll see what ends up happening with these series coming along. Because there's already a Venom series that's ongoing, but there's also already solicits for Venom Lethal Protector. So we'll see what happens with that. And then we'll start seeing solicits also for Carnage #1, and we'll see what happens with that as well. But yeah, that's going to do it for me on this review of these stories here. So I don't know if anybody else out there has read these, if you picked up this particular issue. Like I said, it's the 30th anniversary of Carnage, so that's kind of why they just kind of threw this together. That's fine. You know, I'm not exactly, jonesing for more Carnage killing pets. I'm not too big on that, but whatever. They put it in the book. I can't do anything about that. It's already been done. So it is what it is, and it ain't what it ain't. But that's going to do it for my review on this. So if you enjoyed this video, then make sure to like the video. Make sure you're subscribed. You have the notification bell hit. If you would like to share out the video, you know how much I appreciate you for doing so. But if you're done here, then go and read a book. And if not, then I'll see you on my next video.